Hello people, I'm the Euro Comic Book Gamer. Today on something new, I'm going to be discussing Wytches, which is written by Scott Snyder and the art is done by Jock. Now, I had high expectations for this book because that's the same creative team that did Batman the Black Mirror, which is my favorite Batman book of all time. So yeah, I was really excited about this book. And I have to say, it did meet my expectations. It's a great book. Now, that being said, I highly recommend you go and read it if you have not already and come back here because I'm going to be doing spoilers and it's definitely worth the read. And it's a cheap book too. I got it for $8 on Amazon. I don't know how much normal retail is. Actually, just look. It says it's $10. So yeah, it's definitely worth $10. It's 6 issues. Anyways, let's get into the book. So there are 3 main characters in the book. They are the Rook family, but you have Charlie Rook, who is the father of the family. You have Lucy Rook, the mother of the family, and then you have Sailor Rook, who is sort of the focal point of the story. But Charlie Rook is the I would say the main character because you follow Charlie Rook throughout the book, like more than the other characters. But Sailor, the story is more about her than anyone else. But again, you follow Charlie throughout the book more. So I'd say he's the main character, but the story focuses more on Sailor, if that makes sense. But anyways, there are a lot of cliches in this book. There are a lot of horror movie cliches. They're getting a new start over. Something weird happened in their old town. Where they decide to start over? In the middle of the woods in like the creepiest house possible. Even though they do explain why, and it makes sense, but still it's a horror movie cliche. They're living in the middle of the woods in this like creepy 2-story house. And like she's going to this new school. And you know, the kids don't like her there. The town folk are all a little weird. There's like a lot of, you know, different horror movie cliches. But that being said, they use them well, and the book's great. But anyways, the story starts off with this woman who's stuck in a tree. Yes, a tree. And she's got her head poking out of it, and she's just crying for help. And then this little boy comes by, and he's like, "Mom?" And she says, Timothy, go, grab that rock over there and help me out of this tree. I've been pledged. And the kid goes, grabs the rock, and then smacks his mother in the face with it. And he says, "Pledged is pledged." And that's the end of the intro. Then it cuts to modern day, but whoa, what an intro. It asks so many questions. It's, why is this woman stuck in a tree? What does pledge mean? Why would her son, like, see being pledged is such a big deal and not help his mother out of there? That's huge. But anyways, then it cuts to modern day, and we see 2 of the members of the Rook family, which is Charlie and Sailor. And Charlie's trying to convince his daughter that everything's going to be alright at school because, you know, this is their new fresh start, because whatever happened in the last town they were in. So he's like, everything's going to be fine. Just go to school, you'll be fine. He convinces her to go on the bus, so she gets to school, and while she's there, well, actually, before we see her at school, we see that her father is, like, his occupation is he writes and draws children's books, and his brother is, like, sort of the publisher for those books. And then we go to, I want to say Hope for some reason, but her name's Sailor. And we go to Sailor, which is also a really cool name, by the way. I think Sailor's a cool name. But anyways, Sailor is there at her school, and this girl asks her, "Did you do it? Did you kill her?" And it's like, whoa! Sailor killed someone? And so then we get a flashback and we see what happened. This bully, her name was Annie, and she was bullying Sailor a lot. And so Sailor and her were in the woods for whatever reason. I don't know why Sailor would go in the woods with this girl. This girl is like huge too. She's massive, way bigger than Sailor. And she's in the woods with her, and Sailor's like, "I've had enough of you bullying me," pulls out a knife. And then Annie's like, "Yeah, that's not going to work," pulls out a gun and says, "Drop the knife." Well, she says to take the knife and some stuff that's real nasty that I won't mention. And so she's preparing to do that because it's just real nasty stuff, and he's like, "Do this, otherwise I'm going to kill you." And so Sailor starts to get about to do that, and then she gets swallowed into a tree. Annie just gets like swallowed into this tree, sort of like the one in the beginning who was stuck in the tree. We just see her body just gets like flung into this tree. It's like, whoa, what's going on there? So naturally everyone thinks that well, Sailor did it, but there's no proof to it because when they got there, Sailor was knocked out because right before she got swallowed into the tree, Annie had smacked her with the butt of her gun, so she was out cold. So that's why this girl isn't like in juvie or anything, because they can't really rightfully convict her. She didn't do anything, she was knocked out. But then later that night, we see Sailor's trying to go to sleep, and she looks out her window, and she sees this creepy looking creature out there on a tree, and it turns out that's Annie. At least she looks at her just like, "Annie?" And then we hear a lot of screaming. Her dad runs up the stairs to go get her, and she's like bitten. Her neck is all messed up and stuff, and they're like, "Whoa, what is this?" So they take her to the hospital. They couldn't really figure out what it was. They thought she self-inflicted the damage because she was telling them what actually happened, but obviously they're gonna think she's crazy, another, you know, horror movie cliche. But they're like, "Ah, no, that's stupid." But then again, they can't explain how it's like a bite mark. She couldn't bite herself, so what is going on here? And that's yeah, so from then on, we see later on that she's like having a lot of problems with this bump. Like she imagined things. She thought like there was like her bump turned into a mouth or something. It was real weird. But then we see Sailor's mom, Lucy, at work. She's a nurse. Also, she's paralyzed. So she's in a wheelchair, and she's trying to help this boy that's been in a coma for a while. The boy suddenly wakes up out of the coma. Is like, "How'd you get in your accident?" She says, "I ran into a deer." He says, "No, what'd you really hit?" And she's like, "Whoa, how's this boy know I didn't hit a deer?" And then we get a flashback, and we see that she ran over something that looked like the same creature that Annie was. It wasn't Annie, but it looked like that type of creature. It was all weird, and that's how she got paralyzed. And so there's obviously some secrets there. It's like, okay, well, what is that thing that she ran over? And it just, this book does ask a lot of questions to answer later on. It's really cool how it's done. Then we see that Sailor's dad, Charlie, is at home and he's, working on his book. But then some lady comes up and like tackles him, puts this weird thing in him, like this needle, and she knocks him out. It was weird. She like stabs him in the stomach with his needle and knocks him out. She tells him, "Go like find me when you can, and but come by yourself." It's like, this is weird. This is a weird looking lady too. She's got no legs. She's bald and she wears her shirt open. So it was like real weird looking. And while this is happening, we see that Sailor. She took a school bus. She stole a school bus and ran out to the middle of the woods. And while she's doing that, her uncle, the guy who's helping publish her dad's book, he sees that she's driving the school bus. He goes, he helps her, and like they're in the woods. She's like, "Come out! I know you're calling for me." So it turns out like it seems like this bite thing is what like sort of was calling, like is what made her hear these voices in the woods. And so while her and her uncle are there, these weird creatures that look like the same thing that her mother ran over in that flashback are coming after her, and she's like, "Just take me, leave my uncle alone, just take me." And then it cuts and we don't know what happened. It's just like goes, we don't know what just happened right then. This book uses a lot of Man of Steel style flashbacks. I'm just saying that because that's the best thing I can really relate it to, as in they show flashbacks that correspond with what's going on in modern day, and it's used really well. I really liked how they implemented that. But anyways, we see that there's at the crime scenes Charlie and Lucy, and so are the police, because this school bus has just crashed in the middle of the woods, and now Sailor is missing. So obviously they're all there, and her dad had just gotten there because he was knocked out by that weird lady in his house, and he tells them what happened, and no one believes him. He tells the police and his wife, and everyone's just like, you took a stumble. Have you been drinking or something? Because apparently his wife mentions how he had a drinking problem before. And anyways, from that crime scene, they go into the woods. They go further into the woods. Well, only Charlie does. He wants to find his daughter. He goes in the woods. He sees what he thinks is his brother in a tree. And then the sheriff comes. He's like, "Help me get my brother out of this tree." He starts doing it, and then there's no one in the tree anymore. There's just no one there. He's like, "Oh, I guess I was just hallucinating." And so then they drive home. When they're home, Charlie feels something on his stomach. He looks on his stomach and he sees this thing that says "here." And then he goes and he looks at a map of the place, and it turns out here is the name of a place near there. And so he goes, he takes the car, drives to here, and when he gets there, he sees the bald lady from before. And he took a knife with him, which I just thought was stupid. Like, the moment he went and took this knife, because he's talking to his wife, he's like, "I'm gonna find Sailor, I'm gonna get what I need. This bald lady can tell me what I need to know." So he grabs a knife, and I'm like, it's the 21st century, man. There's things called guns now, and they're a lot more effective than knives. This isn't gonna work out for you. That's like exactly what I was thinking when reading this. And then when he gets to the place and meets the bald lady there, she's got a gun pointed out. I was like, "You idiot! I knew it." And so he gets there, he drops his knife. She hands him a rope and says like, "Make a noose." He ties it up on like the rafters of the building, and then once he makes the noose, he's like, "What now?" And she's like, "Well, I'm gonna hang myself." So she goes over there. She starts telling him all this stuff about these creatures. They're called witches, and they like hunt you once you've been pledged. She doesn't, I don't remember if she tells him or if this guy tells him later on. Either way, I'm going to explain it later. She tells him all this stuff. She tells him that the only way to beat them is to go in there and like kill them with all this special stuff. She's got this sack. Turns out this lady was captured when she was 7 years old, and she's able to escape them. She killed a lot of them, and she hid. She says once you escape them, once you've been pledged and you're able to escape, which is very rare, you have to go hide with these people called the Irons. And the Irons is just, you gotta find them. And she says you need to find this certain person that will take you to where the witches are. And so she just gives them the bag, tells them this stuff like this. There's this stuff called stink in the bag, which is where you rub the stink all over you, and they won't be able to smell you because they can't see anything. They can just like smell you and stuff. And so she hangs herself, and he takes a sack, and then he goes home. when he's home, he's talking to his wife, and his wife's like, yeah, it's some crazy stuff. She like she takes a rag and like cleans his face off because he's still bleeding from earlier. And so because the lady like shot him in the ear while he was there at the house with the lady who hung herself. She shot him in the ear. Anyways, his wife cleans his ear off, and then the sheriff comes over, and he realizes this sheriff is a little different because what he grabs like this list of names that he got from the lady he just saw, and the sheriff is like looking a little weird at those names. So he tackles the sheriff and takes a gun, points at the sheriff's head, and says, "You are going to take me where I want to go. You're going to take me to the witches." And so the sheriff does, and while the sheriff goes there, he's telling him all these different stuff about the witches. Tell him pledged means when you go, you're able to pledge someone by rubbing this stuff, like either you put it in their food or their drink or something, and once it's in them, they're pledged. And pledged is when you do that, and by that you're claiming someone for these witches to eat. They generally prefer younger people. That's why, Sailor, a kid, was pledged. And when you pledge someone, the witches are able to give you whatever you want. Whether you want immortality, you want that girl you really like to like you, that can work too. Whatever it is you want, you just have to give them a meal. You have to pledge someone to them. So say you take some stuff, you put it on someone's sandwich, you give them a sandwich, they start eating it, and then that person is pledged, and now you can get whatever you want from these witches, and that's what pledge means. So someone had pledged Sailor, and he wants to find out who, but at the moment he's just trying to save Sailor. And so he goes there, and he starts stripping down so he can rub the stink all over him, and the sheriff guy says, "Rub it in your mouth too, otherwise they'll smell your breath." And Charlie's like, "Why are you telling me all this stuff?" And he says, "Because I know you're not going to make it out of there. You're going to be dead one way or another." And so he rubs all the stuff in there. He goes into this weird tree-looking place, like underground. He's able to get to his daughter who's been trapped in there, and he helps her out. They get out, and they run to her house. When they get to her house, all these people just start coming towards the house, like all the weird townsfolk I was talking about earlier. They just start going towards the house like a big mob. So while they're sitting in their house and these people are coming after them, and so are the witches, Charlie says, "Okay, I have more stuff from that lady down the basement. Go get it, Sailor, so that way we can, try to fend these people off somehow." And when she goes to do that, she gets smacked in the back of the head by Lucy, and then Lucy shoots Charlie in the leg, and he's like, "What's going on?" And then Lucy stands out of her chair and she says, "I'm trying to save us." It's like, she pledged her own daughter so she could walk again. This is insane. I never saw that coming. And then she starts explaining to Charlie everything that's going on. She's like, "My family has been pledged for like centuries, but one man was able to break it. That was my great-grandfather. What he did was he pledged his parents and then went and hid with the irons. He was able to stay safe. Then he came out when he thought everything was safe." And then she tells him how she thought that maybe he brought the witches upon them, that because unknowingly that Charlie did, because Sailor had always been this sort of fraidy, like this really afraid kid. Like she never really took too many steps in like the sort of brave direction. She always been anxious and really afraid, and Charlie just wanted her to be secure and like believe in herself and stuff. That's how we always wanted her to be, but she wasn't. So she was saying that she thought that maybe he accidentally brought the witches upon them. So she pledged Sailor, so that way she could walk again, they could all be safe. And once you pledge someone like they're dead or something, you forget all about them. You forget they even exist. And so she says, "Come on, Charlie, we'll be fine. I love her so much, but this is a way me and you can have a fresh start. We won't even remember we had her. Everything will be fine. We can have another baby." And it was like, whoa, this lady's really dark and twisted. And so Sailor wakes up. She's like, "What's going on, Dad?" And he looks at her and says, "Everything's gonna be all right." He grabs this stuff out of a bag, which is pledge, the stuff you put in someone's sandwich or in their drink. And he grabs it, wipes it on himself, goes, slaps his wife in the face with it, and then runs at all the witches. Like the witches are break into their house at this moment. He tells Sailor to run. He runs straight at the witches after he pledged himself and his wife, and just starts fighting them and says, "I have the best daughter in the world." And he just sacrificed himself, and she runs off, and the book ends with Sailor driving off. It's like, that's one intense, amazing ending. Like, he sacrificed himself so that way his daughter could live, and his wife was evil, and whoa. And then we get like a little short story at the very end to where we see that this guy pledging his sister, and it was like really intense and dark. But anyways, overall, this book is amazing. It's a page turner. I read it all in one sitting. It didn't take too long. It's 6 issues. but it didn't take too long because I just kept turning the page. I was like, okay, I gotta find out what happens next. What happens next? What happens next? It's amazing, and the storytelling is great. It's Scott Snyder. You know him by now. He's great. Jock's art works perfectly for this scary story. Like, it's just amazing how everything is in this book. Just look at all this. I mean, it's amazing. Jock did a fantastic job with art. It's like even the book's cover is creepy. The book is the creepiest book I've ever read. Not saying a whole lot because I don't read horror books, but it is a very creepy book, and I read it at night. I suggest if you read it, you should read it at night too. It just adds a bit more to the effect, and it's a great book. I ended like the characters are great. Lucy, now that I realize it, it's like Lucy and Charlie from Charlie Brown. I don't know if they went for that on purpose, but that's what it seems kind of like. But anyways, the book is amazing. I highly recommend it. It's cheap too. It's only $10 for retail, and you can find it even cheaper online. Again, I got it for $8 off Amazon. It's really cheap, great for the price, amazing. Like, I really hope we get maybe a sequel to it. I don't know, like, it says volume 1, but I don't know like what they're gonna do next. I'm really excited if they do something next because this book was great and I love it and I can't wait to see more of it. It's amazing. The characters are great. The art is great. The storytelling is great. There are horror cliches, but they use them wisely. I forgot to mention that the whole them hiding in the woods thing, like their house being creepy in the woods, was explained by the fact that Lucy says that's the whole reason they moved to the creepy house in the woods was because the witches, so they could be closer to them. And yeah, book's amazing. I highly recommend you go get it. And for my next book on something new, it's going to be a bit of a sweeter book. That's my hint. It's super obvious, but anyways, there you go. So yeah, see you guys next time on something new. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like.